In the meantime, while we're waiting for people to join, could I just ask everyone if you can close your camera and your microphone so that we allow the guest speakers to appear. Thank you. Okay, we're roughly halfway in the number of participants. I suggest we give it a couple more minutes and then we go. John, I'm going to hand you the floor. Duncan, John is going to show up on Spotlight. And then as soon as John finishes, I'll be basically removing his Spotlight and handing over to you.
Thanks, Andre.
Cheers. Okay, one more minute and we start in a minute. So I just want to remind everyone, if you can close your cameras and your microphones, if you can close your cameras and microphones so that we make sure that only the presenters are on. Thank you so much. Just a second. Sorry. I'm gonna go to, okay, good. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to another National Association Development Series webinar, or NADS, as we are now calling them. Thank you all for joining and making the time to be with us. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Duncan Bennett, who is going to be presenting the webinar. But first, and to start this webinar, I'd like to give the floor to FIH's Sport Director, John Wyatt, who is going to tell us a bit more about FIH's sustainability strategy and where we are with that. John, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Andre, and welcome and hello to everybody on the call. I was going to say it was nice to see you all, but Andre's asked you to all turn off your videos. So it's nice to have so many of you on the call, and thank you for your time and for giving up your time today to listen to us. As Andre mentioned, before Duncan gets into the detail of today, we thought it would be helpful if I give you a little bit of a context of where we are with our sustainability thinking here, both at the FIH, but also within hockey as a whole. Over the last few years, clearly sustainability has been a buzzword and a topic that has been of increasing importance everywhere in the world. And not least within hockey, and we have had a groundswell of momentum and of interest in and questioning really in what we are doing within hockey to improve the sustainability of our sport. At the same time, if you like, if that's from below, from the sport as a whole, we've also had pressure and an increasing interest from above, from the IOC, who, as you will all have read, are increasing their focus on sustainability and what they are therefore requesting and requiring of all stakeholders within the Olympic movement. And as an Olympic sport and as an Olympic International Federation, we're certainly a big part of that. So we have this, if you like, joint imperative from a groundswell of opinion from hockey and also from the IOC to really be clear on what our sustainability strategy is, what our plans are, and how we are ensuring hockey is a sustainable sport for the future. So we've been working on this for the last 7 or 8 months, and at the last FIH Executive Board meeting last month, our strategy was in fact signed off and agreed. And so we're now turning that strategy into practice. The good news is that there is already a huge amount of work and a huge amount of positive projects going on around the world in the sustainability space. But it's fair to say that until now, we haven't collected them all together, reported on them in a collated way, and therefore had a single strategy that we could talk about as our sustainability plan. So that is what the strategy does. We are going to launch it at our biannual congress, which will be held in November virtually this year. And so we're not going public with it until then, because as well as launching the strategy at that point, we're also going to be launching the first sustainability report for hockey. And for that, we will be collecting many of the great projects and the work that is already going on around the world. So rather than simply announcing a strategy and saying this is what we want to do, we want to say this is what we have done, this is where we are at the moment, and then these are the targets and this is the plan to improve our sustainability going forwards. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that today. As I say, that will be launched in November. Excuse me. But just to give you a little summary, we've divided up our strategy, and this is in line with the IOC, excuse me, into 3 areas, which we're calling people, planet, and prosperity. People, making sure that we are an inclusive sport for everyone, wherever they are, whatever age they are, whatever gender they are around the world. Planet, obviously, is the environmental strand of sustainability, where we're making sure that our carbon footprint is minimized as much as possible, that we reduce our water usage, and that we have plans in place to recycle and reuse materials after their initial lifetime. And clearly there is a huge aspect of that which is down to our facilities and our equipment, which we'll hear more about today from Duncan. And then the third area of prosperity is making sure that we invest in a sustainable way. We make sure that the assets that we have, we sweat, and we make sure that we use them as efficiently and effectively as possible. But then also that we have a plan for what happens at the end of the life cycle of a particular product or of a particular facility. So I think it's hopefully helpful to have that context in terms of where we are. This is not an FIH strategy, a sustainability strategy. This is a sustainability strategy for all of hockey. Everyone involved in hockey has a part to play, whether you're a player, an official, an administrator, a manufacturer, or a supplier to our sport. We all have a part to play, and by all working together in a singular defined direction, we've got the best opportunity to really make a difference and to ensure that our sport continues to be more and more sustainable as we move forward. So hopefully, as Duncan is going through some of the information that he'll talk through today, and as the discussion evolves, and you have some of your some questions and answers as we go through the discussion, you'll be able to see how each of these three areas of sustainability around people, planet, and prosperity are relevant in different ways in those different areas. But I hope we felt that it was going to be helpful to have that context before getting onto the detail. So. Without getting into any more detail, I'm going to pass back to Andre, I think, who will then introduce Duncan. Thank you once again for your time. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to a good discussion. Thanks, Andre.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for and we definitely look forward to hearing more about FIH's sustainability strategy and the medium and long term. Before I hand it over to Duncan, I just want to let you know about a new feature on Teams that might be relevant to you all that are not native English speakers. We're going to be putting a PowerPoint on the screen, and you can find on the bottom left part of your Teams screen a feature that will allow you to automatically translate the slides into your language. Feel free to ask questions in the meantime. If you can't find that, maybe leave it in the chat. We will put a screenshot of it when Duncan starts, so that you can see exactly where that is located, and so that you can follow the presentation better using your own local language. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Duncan Bennett. Duncan is the Managing Director of NADS Sports Facility Consultants, who with a big pleasure from us is at one of the FIH Academy partners. And Duncan has a huge amount of experience and knowledge within the facilities area, not just from the construction and the technological parts of this area, but also from the human side, from the planning, the club relation, club development, local development, which is one of the stronger reasons for us to having partner with NADS Sports and with their work. Duncan, over to you.
Thanks, Andre. Hello to everybody. Thanks for attending, as everybody has already said. I will tend to speak quite quickly, so I will try to slow down and make everything as clear as possible. And as we go through the presentation, as Andre has said, if you can submit questions through the chat function, we can address them at an appropriate time, probably at the end, but maybe as we go through as well. So the presentation Andre will be sharing on the screen is designed to give you an understanding of what the sustainability arguments and discussions that are happening in hockey development where we're working, which is predominantly in England and Britain, but they will translate across to your area, your territory. And so by the end of the presentation, the ambition is that you'll have an understanding of what we're doing as a hockey pitch designer, the conversations we're having with our customers, and then hopefully you'll have a set of questions and points to consider if and as you are looking at a project in your particular area and territory and country. So thank you for attending, and if we go on to the next slide, Andre. We are a sort of as an overview of NADS Sport and what I do day to day here at NADS Sport as part of a team. We engage with customers who are looking to develop artificial turf, hockey turf sports pitches, and increasingly we are being asked to consider and equally want to consider the best ways we can provide facilities, considering all different types of aspects, but including sustainability. Next slide. So I mentioned the aims of the presentation. We'll give you an overview and an introduction to topics and conversations we're having regularly about sustainability and how we can integrate sustainable solutions into hockey pitch designs, how that could translate to a project that you're working on, and also identify, because sustainability is such a broad topic, how that could also influence other areas and other aspects of a project relating to hockey. So we'll look at pitches in the main, but there'll be other areas to consider as well. And as I mentioned a minute ago, moving away when we finish, you'll also be able to have a set of questions and ideas that you can take away, consider in your own area that can work for, hopefully, a project no matter where you are in the country, in the world, I should say. So where does sustainability fit? Well, we've got a cycle on the next few slides that will show exactly where it fits. And as Andre clicks through to the next slide, you'll see that it actually starts, in our experience, right from the idea of having or developing a project. So we call that the inception stage, where a customer is thinking, I've got a project in mind. I want to deliver a hockey project so that I can either develop hockey in my area, or I have a demand for hockey through a club or a school or a team, and I want to deliver a hockey project to fulfill that requirement. The idea of developing that project means that you should be considering all different things right from the outset, including sustainability. So moving from that very first stage, we are engaging with customers who have got that idea, and then our very first conversations with them are establishing how feasible it is to deliver that project, taking into consideration all different types of things relating to the physical delivery of a project, but also, as I say, the elements outside of the physical, fencing and lighting and everything. So moving back one stage to inception, we can leave the slide as it is, but we'll be challenging the customers to understand what it is that they are bringing to us. So they want a hockey pitch, but why do they want a hockey pitch? Is it because there is a demand in their area? Is it because they've already got a hockey pitch and they want a second one? Is it because they've got a training requirement? Because all this will inform discussions and conversations and decision making as to what it is actually that best suits their needs. Once we've done that discussion, we go on to the feasibility stage, and at that point we might still be considering a range of different options, and against that a range of different implications for each option. So for example, if you click onto that next stage, Andre, and maybe the one after it as well, that feasibility stage will be saying, right, I'll take an example of a customer that I spoke to last week. I went out to see them. They've got a school site. They wanted to deliver a hockey pitch project because they've got links with a hockey club. A hockey club wanted a facility that their kids could use, their junior teams could use for evening training and potentially a match at a weekend. So the conversation there is, okay, well, there's a number of different things that you could achieve and deliver against that brief. It could be that you want a full-size pitch because you want the flexibility of what a full-size hockey pitch gives you. But equally, if it's for a junior club, it could be that you only need a half-size pitch because junior matches and training is typically on a half-size pitch. So we will rationalise that out at feasibility and then provoke conversation and debate with the customer as they move through the feasibility stage into the design phase, which is where we start to make some decisions against the questions that we've set out in the feasibility. In terms of sustainability, that is a thread that links through this entire cycle. So as I say, we'll be talking to customers about the ways to deliver a sustainable facility across all areas of sustainability, right from that first conversation at inception stage, through feasibility, getting some hard and fast decisions into the design stage that then leads into the next stage, which we click through to construction, which then leads to delivering the project, and then your hockey pitch, as I'm sure everybody on the webinar understands, will last a period of time where you've got to manage it as a customer. You'll have to implement a certain amount of maintenance and management process to reach a point where 10, 12, 15 years in the future, you'll be resurfacing the pitch, at which point you've got considerations as to how you go about a resurface project and the sustainable ways that you can approach that stage. And the reason that that cycle exists and is discussed from day one is because we want to be providing customers with good quality advice, thought-provoking questions from the moment that they're in touch with us thinking about a project. When I started doing hockey pitch development and facilities 20 years ago, it was more along the lines of receiving an inquiry from a club or a school who wanted a pitch, and you would go, that's fantastic, here's how you can do it, we'll see you in 10 years time when you might be looking at a resurface. Things have moved on since that time, and now we want to provide a complete life cycle and analysis and level of understanding to every customer with whom we engage, so that from the moment that they're looking at a pitch, they understand this is a 10, 20, 30 year investment, and that there are choices and decisions you've got to make from early stages to ensure that you're going to make the right decisions throughout that 20, 30 year period. So that's a complete life cycle, and we'll come back to that later in the presentation. Looking to the next one. So that is quite a perhaps overwhelming thought, that you might have to consider things that are going to happen in 20 or 30 years time from today, because you might be looking at delivering a project in the next 12, 18 months, 2 years. And I'm saying that you need to think about what that means in 20 or 30 years time. So how can we break that down into more understandable bite-sized chunks? So what we felt was a good approach to take for the presentation was to basically illustrate decisions and discussions across 6 or 7 areas that would be standard for any type of hockey project, any type of artificial turf project. So hopefully the next 7-ish slides will be a way that we can go from the whole project and being quite overbearing over 30 years to illustrating how we can consider those concepts, sustainability and good thought-provoking design innovation in areas of a hockey pitch. So the first thing we do with a customer, I mentioned earlier, is try to understand what it is that they're looking to deliver, both at the moment that we're in contact with them, i.e. now, but also what might happen in the next 5, 10 years and how that could influence the delivery of a project now. So apologies if that's not 100% clear, but I'll try and explain. What I'm saying is that if a customer is looking to deliver, like the example I gave earlier, a junior pitch project, that might mean that we deliver a half-size pitch now. But if the usage of the project is such that demand increases, hockey participation grows, which is what we want, that might lead to the customer needing a larger facility in, say, 10 years' time. So what we want to do is understand what could happen as a result of the first project and see if we can future-proof and consider that from the outset. Because if we can, then that allows us to make some really informed and long-term decisions early. What we don't want to do, if we can avoid it, is make a decision now that's going to meet your demands and needs in 2022, but that haven't been considered for what may come in the future, because that could mean that we've missed an opportunity to create a sustainable solution in the first stage. So this facility rationale section is about challenging customers and giving you from today an opportunity to really think through what it is you're looking to deliver in your area, in your part of the world. So what standard do you need the pitch to be? Is it going to be a pitch that is going to be used for an Olympic qualification? Because that will inform the design choice massively. Or is it going to be more of a grassroots hockey development to create participation levels? So if we go back to that, sorry, Andre, we skipped, I think. There we are. So we want to understand what the performance requirements are now and what that could lead to in the future. What usage is going to be put onto the pitch, what type of clubs, what type of hockey players, what level of club and usage is going to be on there, and also what pitch size it is that you're looking to deliver. And the illustrations on the scheme are projects that we've delivered of all different types and sizes. So the upper right project where it's a green pitch, that is a small training pitch for junior hockey at a school environment where they have links to a club further down the road. So the idea is that we're creating a pathway for junior hockey players at the school. The school didn't have any hockey provision previously. They would love a full-size pitch, but we understood and they made decisions and realised that a full-size pitch wasn't feasible for a number of reasons. But they didn't need it and they could achieve their needs with a pitch that size, which was 60 metres by 40 metres. So even in a sort of European hockey setting, we're still doing a lot of projects that aren't full size because we can deliver a scheme that meets a whole number of different strategic aims without going full size. And then the upper left one with the blue surround, that's a full size new build pitch we did for a club and a school as a joint project. And then the bottom right is where you have a water-based pitch next to a sand dress pitch for a club. Again, it's actually with a school so that they can deliver multiple games at a single time. So there's all these different considerations right from that initial outset that we will consider with customers and that you as a customer should be thinking about. I'd love a full-size pitch perhaps, but is it realistic? And can I start with a smaller pitch like the school with the green pitch on the upper right? Because that'll give me a huge amount of value, and then maybe in a few years' time, I can look at doing a full-size. So that facility rationale is really important and a great opportunity for you to understand and challenge yourselves as to what it is that you could deliver in your area. And if it ends up being a full-size pitch that's needed, fine, but equally, we know that we can deliver a lot of outcomes for hockey on a smaller facility. If you can go on to the next slide, Andre, that'd be great. So once we've understood what it is you're looking to deliver in terms of a pitch size, what are the areas within the pitch construction where sustainability could be incorporated? So we've got 6 elements of a pitch that we are regularly challenging ourselves in terms of designers, but also discussing with customers how we can build sustainability in across a different number of different measures. So the next slide, Andre will address the first of these. So here in Britain, as I'm looking out of a window in front of me with the rain lashing down, we live and work in a fairly wet climate, or inclement as we would call it. And so we have to consider on any project how we deal with rainfall. If you're looking at a water-based pitch, you've also got to deal with how you could deal with the watering system and irrigate and recycle that watering. But we'll focus on drainage here for the time being. So drainage is a key factor where you are in a part of the world that has rainfall, and there are different ways that you can apply sustainable drainage solutions. Here in England, every single project that we deliver has to have what's called a micro drainage calculation to meet unitary authority requirements. So this is a statutory requirement for us as pitch designers. We have to demonstrate how drainage can be managed and meet increased flood risk here in Britain and Western Europe. There'll be different requirements for different parts of the world, but providing a sustainable drainage solution is critical to ensuring that your pitch will provide performance for not just the first 5 years or 10 years of the installation, but in 20 and 30 years as well. So typically, you can see the trenches and the pipes being installed on some of these photos, but there are also drainage blankets that you can install that do away with the need to put pipes in, and that can strengthen the formation on which the pitch is constructed. So I don't want to get too bogged down in technical terminology. The important thing here is that drainage, flood prevention, is critical. And if we do get that right, the pitch will be future-proofed for a long period of time from a drainage performance and flood prevention point of view. So if you're looking at developing a project, drainage, almost regardless of where you are in the world, should be a critical part of what you're looking to assess, and understanding what the local, regional and national requirements are is a very, very important step and should be considered a part of your feasibility report and design. And then I'll just pause here before we go on to the next slide, because the important thing to take at this stage is also any decisions you make on these elements as we go through them, drainage being the first one, will have an impact on what you can do and what you can choose from for the next element. So if we choose a particular type of drainage design here, it's almost certain that that will inform the type of base construction, which is the next slide, Andre, that you would do on top of the drainage. So you could provide a very, very detailed and well-drained facility design in your drainage solution that might lessen the depth of stone that you need in your base construction. So the choices and the understanding that you have on each of these areas will start to inform the design choices that are available to you across all the next elements. So what you do on drainage will inform base construction, will inform the next one. There's basically two types of base construction, focusing on this slide now, which are stone bases, which is your sort of bottom left there, and then your tarmac base, which we call tarmac in the UK, also called asphalt. So your bound engineered base. Most hockey pitches are built with a bound asphalt or tarmac base. But in Europe, they'll build them with different types of select stone layers, which we see in Holland quite a lot, and some parts of Germany. Where you are in your part of the world, there might be different base construction techniques. Each has a range of advantages and a range of implications for choice as from a sustainability point of view. What you want to be doing is challenging your pitch contractors if you're engaging direct with the contractor, or your pitch designers like ourselves here in the UK, on what the options are, in terms of cost, but also in terms of long-term performance, and equally what the building requirements and the contractors are able to deliver in your part of the world, because there are different skill sets required to install a stone base compared to a tarmac asphalt base, and there's also different machinery required. So where you are in the world might mean that you don't have access to the type of asphalt pavers that are needed for a tarmac base, which might mean you've got a stone base more likely. What you are able to do with your base construction is design that in combination with your drainage to provide a complete attenuation solution. So in the UK here, we have to demonstrate that the base and the design are interlinked and that consideration has been given So the two things work together. And if we do that, the next slide is the choice of shock pad. And again, the choice of shock pad will depend on what the base construction is. So the bottom left illustration photo there is of the most common type of shock pad seen in the UK, which is called a bound rubber shock pad. In situ is the phrase they use here in the UK. And that's installed on a asphalt base. If you can't do an asphalt base because you have local sort of restrictions on accessing asphalt or tarmac and you're on stone, you might be looking more at a prefabricated shock pad, which is the white material being rolled out on the pitch to the upper left. And then there is also base innovation shock pad solutions that perform almost as a upper base and a shock pad in a prefabricated tile type system, which is the grey tile that you see the gentleman installing almost like a big jigsaw on a stone base. So this can get quite complicated, which is why it's important that you go away from today with a lot of good quality questions to ask as you start to look at facility projects, because as I keep mentioning, the choice on one element will inform the choice of a shock pad, will inform the choice of a base construction. So understanding all these different areas to a degree and working with good quality people like the FIH, the FIH Academy, pitch designers in your territory, companies like ourselves, will mean that you'll get some really good quality advice and support to help you navigate through all these different choices. Just focusing very quickly on shock pad, some of these products are 100% recyclable. Some of the base construction options would allow you to use recycled stone aggregate. Some of the base construction requirements will require a little bit more maintenance and remediation at each resurface. An asphalt base, one of the advantages of a tarmac asphalt base is that once it's installed well, it's pretty much going to be there for as long as you want it to be there. And that might mean that you only need to resurface the carpet and the shock pad. The upper left shock pad, that white material being rolled out, has a warranty longer than typically a rubber shock pad. And so all these choices inform how you can create a sustainable design from drainage to base, now shock pad, and then the next slide, how your choice of those elements inform the choice of surfacing. Because if you recall right at the start, we were saying understanding the requirements from a performance point of view is critical from the outset, because understanding whether you want a training pitch, a competition pitch, an Olympic level pitch will also inform the choice of surface that you have, which will almost certainly inform the type of shock pad that you provide with that surface, because some surfaces don't mix with some shock pads and vice versa, which means that all of this has to be understood and thought through and discussed at inception stage and feasibility stage. So the three types of surfaces that we illustrate here are a green pitch, which is a sand-filled pitch in the north of England, that one. And I'll come on to something else on that photo that's worth noting in a second. We've then got a sand dress pitch on the upper left, I think, yeah it is, and a water-based pitch or sand dress pitch on the bottom right. So the surface choice is somewhat determined by what activities you want to do on it. Even in England, this is an interesting point, I think, even in England and UK, the majority of hockey pitches still support additional sporting activities. And by that, I mean that the hockey pitches that you see on these photos are also used by football, tennis, netball, and you can manipulate the design of the surface choice and the shock pad to meet those different range of activities. The bottom right, the top left one, I think, is a dedicated hockey pitch. So that one didn't have the impact or considerations for different sports. But again, all this feeds back in to the questions you need to ask of yourselves and also with your pitch designers, providers. What services allow me to do hockey, but also potentially other activities that would be of value in your area, because that will help build the strongest usage and usually the strongest business case to underpin the pitch investment and project itself. I said I'd come back to the upper right picture there, the green pitch. And the reason I said I would was it's not just the pitch that we consider, it's also things like parking. So you can see the grey area to the left of the pitch itself is marked with white lines and some yellow hashed markings. That's all car parking that was constructed alongside the pitch so people can drive into the site to the footprint. Yeah, and then also on the green pitch, Andre, you can see that's it. There you go. So it's also understanding if you're looking at a new pitch or increased usage of a existing pitch, that you provide sufficient, or at least give thought to providing sufficient parking and access for that new facility that you're going to invest in. And that doesn't matter if it's a full-size pitch or a junior-size pitch or a hockey fives pitch or a Gen 2 pitch. All these things need to be considered if people are going to come to your site to use your pitch. You want to provide them with a complete solution. And that is as much of a sustainability argument as it is using recycled materials, because you want to be providing a sustainable design from a pitch point of view using all those things we've mentioned, recyclable shock pads and what have you, but also a sustainable facility in terms of people actually using it on the day you open it, and then also moving through as hopefully more and more people use the pitch for hockey. So we've covered drainage, which may or may not have greater relevance in certain parts of the world than others. We've considered base construction. We've considered shock pads options, of which there are a number. And we've considered surface type, and also alongside it, different ways that you can provide what we call ancillary areas like parking. But there's also areas beyond the pitch surface and base that you need to consider from a sustainability point of view as well. So fencing. In England, I think for reasons that nobody even in England's quite sure, we build everything with high cages around the perimeter. They're all 3 meters high or 5 meters even in some cases. And elsewhere in the world, we know that there would be more of the lower height fencing illustrated in the bottom left there. That's as low as 1.2 meters. So there's different criteria that you would choose your fencing height and solution from. Critical ones are maybe obviously are how high do you need the fence to keep balls in play and protect anybody or anything like buildings outside of the pitch itself. So you don't want to put a low height fence all the way around if you've got glass windows or cars parked right up against the pitch where ball strikes will be common. So you might want to increase the height of the fencing in certain areas, either with higher fencing or, as that photo illustrates, with extra netting on top of fencing. Thanks, Andre, it's perfect. Also, are there fencing systems available to you in your area that will have more benefit to hockey? So are there fencing systems that are better absorbing a hockey ball than others? And is that better for you? Or is your site more about providing security, in which case, probably in the UK, this is the reason really, we're also trying to provide a secure fenced perimeter to stop people we don't want getting on the pitch. causing damage to the surface or using it for reasons other than hockey. So there are a number of different considerations to give to make sure that you're making informed choices and making the right choice for what type of fencing system is correct for you. And every single project we do will have a slight difference in terms of height, whether it comes with netting, whether it's a security fence and a hockey ball fence, whether the local planning department want blue fencing, as the illustration shows there. But all these things need to be considered. So as the project develops into, if you remember back to that cycle, there was feasibility, design, construction. So by the time you get to the construction phase, you've thought through every single decision so that you know why you're choosing a fence with netting or are only doing a low height fence. So fencing is an integral part of any hockey pitch and needs to be considered as much as the surface. And the choice of fence will come with a certain performance and longevity that you need to consider in your project feasibility and discussions. As well as fencing, the other area of a pitch that is very, very common because it provides year-round usage is sports lighting. You might call it flood lighting or just lighting, depending on where you are in the world. Here in the UK, again, there are specific standards and measures that we have to demonstrate when we're putting a lighting system in. So there's areas of the country that are rural farming areas that don't have much light spill. So we have to be very strict with the light controls that go on and in around pitches. The upper left pitch there that's illuminated is in a more urban area. You can see that housing in the background in street lighting. So there's a bit more flexibility and acceptance of a measured, I hasten to add, but a bit more flexibility in terms of light spill because it's an urban area where light exists already. On a sustainability point of view, the industry up until probably 4 or 5 years ago predominantly used metal halide lighting that typically needed re-lamping or replacement lamps every 10, 12 years. In the last 4 or 5 years, here in Europe at least, there is a big move towards LED lighting, and the costs, which were a lot more, have come down, and metal halide, older fashioned lighting has sort of gone up. The advantage from a sustainability point of view, from an LED point of view, is that as it stands today, there are greater controls that we can get from light spill using LEDs, by and large, and also they require a lot less power. So when we're looking at energy consumption as part of a sustainability strategy, if we can use LEDs, we need less supply, we need less energy, and there are less running costs. So sustainability wise, it's often the case that LED lighting is preferred. And on top of that, we could also control the light spill better. So that bottom right picture, I should say, is perhaps surprisingly in the middle of a city because you can't see anything around it. But we used LED there because there was housing very close by and we had to control the light spill, so we didn't cast light onto residential houses and flats. So the advantage of LED was twofold for that customer. It was cheaper to run and they got better light control, which was deemed to be better from a planning point of view as well. So again, in your area of the world, there will be different providers of lighting solutions. What I would suggest you do is ask them for their options. I would hazard a guess that they would be able to offer both traditional metal halide options and LED. If they only offer one, I would ask what the reasons for that are. There might well be perfectly valid ones. If they offer both, it's asking them to explain to you what the capital costs are, what the running costs are, and what the replacement costs are. So that, again, you get a full picture, not just in terms of what it costs today, but what it's going to cost you over probably a 10-year period. Final point on lighting. The other reason that a lot of the customers here in Europe are going to LED is that they come with a fully serviced 10-year warranty package. So if anything goes wrong, God forbid, then the company that supplied the LEDs will come out and fix it because they're confident that it will last that long. So you do get that comfort. I don't know whether that would translate everywhere in the world, but that is something to ask as well. What warranties you're going to get from different lighting systems and providers, because that may well inform what option you go for. So we've covered how pitch is built almost, and the considerations, broadly speaking, you might place on drainage, base construction, shock pads, surface. We've then looked at fencing and lighting, and typically they're the constants that we see time and time again on hockey pitch projects. Some don't have lighting, admittedly, but it's usually a consideration at feasibility stage that we then go through and challenge those customers to consider. And our job, we believe, is to provide the best possible information to customers looking to develop a facility so that they can make informed decisions as to what the right surface is, the right shock pad, the right base construction. And then we will put that together as a package and invite the contracting sector to build what that agreed design is. I've simplified that massively, but that's what we want to do. The next slide, I can see questions coming in, so I'm not ignoring those. I think we'll cover them at the end. As well as all that, there's also other areas to consider, and this could be another presentation, if not in and of itself, to be honest. If you're providing a facility where you've got clubs playing, maybe you want to consider dugouts, a couple of types that you can see in front of you there. The grey dugouts, the one in the middle there, is for officials because they were going to have formal hockey matches on that pitch. More than likely, you're going to have goals. And whilst I don't have any great advice to give on what goals are more sustainable than another, I think what we are going to see moving forward is innovation and consideration, I should say, innovation and consideration from providers of goals and dugouts and other areas and other elements of a hockey pitch from a sustainability and life cost point of view. So again, in your area, there are goals that would be at one end of a price scale. There'll be goals at the other end of the price scale, one cheap, one expensive potentially. Maybe neither of those are right and the one that sits in the middle is correct, but do have a look at what they offer, and in particular for the type of performance and hockey usage that you're going to use on your pitch. So there's lots of different extra elements. I don't know if you can quite see, but there's like a grey line running into the sky on the upper left picture above the officials' dugout, and a curtain. That's it. And then there's a curtain in front, just behind the officials' dugout. And again, what that allows you to do as a customer is to pull the curtain out on that wire that traverses the pitch, covers the pitch, and you can then separate a full-size pitch, or indeed any size pitch, with a dividing net that allows you to have 2, 3 teaching and coaching spaces. So again, that sort of consideration as to how the pitch is going to be used will also inform what other elements of a hockey pitch, like a dividing net, would be valuable to you to have on your project. So when we're looking at a project from the outset, we're also assessing everything that might be needed. Not just the pitch, not just the fence, not just the lights, but also dugouts, goals, ways that you can divide a hockey pitch to create multiple teaching practice areas, and yeah, everything that goes with that. On to the next slide, if I may, Andre. So yeah, if you imagine we're going to go into a time machine and leap forward 10 years. So we've just considered how you might think through all those different areas of a hockey pitch. Well, we're also now going to think what happens in 10, 12, 14 years time, however long it might be, because there's no defined time a hockey surface lasts. But at some point, the surface will need replacing. And your shot pad, depending on choice, may also need replacing at that time. So how you choose to deliver your pitch across those areas we've gone through will also inform what and how you could go and resurface the pitch. So we want to make sure that we've future-proofed the design to create access for vehicles coming onto the pitch for a resurface. So you can see just above the word life, there's a gate that's wide enough to get the construction vehicles into this little pitch so that they could start cutting the surface up with the shot pad and disposing of it in a good quality way. So at end of life, firstly, you want to make sure that you're creating an initial pitch design that allows you to deal with the surface when it needs replacing. Point one, quite important. Second point is, what are my options today in 2022, and what are the sustainable ways in 2022 that you could get rid of a pitch, and what is moving forward likely to be a sustainable way of getting rid of a pitch in 2032, 2035 and forward. I mentioned earlier that some shot pads will have a performance warranty that comes for 2 carpet cycles, maybe even 3 carpet cycles. If you went for one of those, you'd only have to consider resurfacing the carpet, the green bit, and you could leave everything else underneath in place. So that might be a way that you create a sustainable initial solution now, knowing that you've got to plan to replace the surface at its end of life. What we're seeing now, and Alistair at the FIH will be able to give you individually advice across different parts of the world, but what we're seeing in Western Europe and elsewhere is recycling options arriving on the market. So this is quite new, and in the last couple of years really, that we are able to say, when the turf comes up and it's rolled into short manageable chunks, that material could be sent to a new recycling plant where it could be at the moment downcycled, so repurposed, so not repurposed, that's another phrase, downcycled into another product. So very recently there's been a recycling plant opened in the UK where they'll take an old carpet and they will shred it, break it down, and they'll make insulating panel boards for buildings or footings for fencing and different applications. So we're not recycling it back to a new hockey pitch, but we are downcycling it to use as another solution. And that is probably the most sustainable end of life option we have today. Over the next 5 years, certainly 10 years, I'd be confident in saying there will be further innovation and improvement. So in areas of the world, not everywhere, I hasten to add, I imagine in 10 years, certainly, there will be solutions that will take a grass, maybe melt it down in some way, and produce new plastic products that could be an artificial grass. So I'm a bit crystal ball gazing there. That doesn't exist at the moment. That's where I think it will go. But what you should be doing in your area is asking what happens to my surface when it reaches the end of its life, and what options have I got today in 2022? What's happening in my area that might mean there are more options coming shortly, or there isn't any innovation at the moment in my part of the world. However, it stands to reason that things will improve, and I'll keep an eye on that ready so I know in 10 years' time how to get rid of it. At the moment, surface choices for hockey are still made of different components. So you can see the black rolls there on the photo. That's a hockey carpet rolled up, and what you can see is the latex backing. So on that upper right corner in front of the white barrier, there are some rolls. That is the green carpet rolled up, and you're seeing the latex backing. You've then got another material, polyester maybe, and then you've got the green surface that you see and play on probably. But they are three separate components. And so it's quite difficult, not impossible, but it's quite difficult to basically treat them in one process and produce a product that you can use as a new hockey grass. So the final thing on this point to be aware of is manufacturers are moving into ways that they can create hockey turfs with a single product. So instead of a latex backing and a backing cloth and the green polyethylene, probably yarn, the green bit you play on, it will be all potentially polyethylene. And then it's much easier for a recycling plant to treat it because it's one product, not three. I hope that made some degree of sense. The point I'm making, though, or the point you should take from that is to continue to keep abreast through the FIH media channels, talking to manufacturers in your area of what the manufacturing sector is doing, and is there new products coming in on the market that are perhaps more capable of being treated sustainably at the end of its life than older fashioned types of carpet. So that's where we're moving to as an industry. We see manufacturers both trying to create solutions to deal with carpets that have maybe been in the ground 15, 20 years, made that long ago as well, and also moving towards solutions that can be brought to market maybe in the next couple of years, that when they reach their end of life in 10, 15 years time, can be recycled in an easier, more cost-effective way and produce a better recycled product that could be made into another grass potentially. Apologies for dwelling on that, but it's quite important because this is probably the area of innovation that you'll see most movement on moving forward. On to the next slide, if I may. I believe Alistair Cox is on the call. I might ask him to leap in here to help me out. But in Western Europe, this whole end-of-life disposal and consideration of sustainable options on surface and shop pad is becoming formally and independently assessed. This slide is taken from a European programme that's being brought into place later this year, and every synthetic turf and shop pad, jump in when I get it wrong, Alistair, is going to be measured against all these different 16 criteria so that you could, as a customer, log on and see which is the least, or sorry, I'll start that again, which is the most sustainable, to use that word, options compared to others that may be on the market. Have I got any of that wrong, Alistair, or was that reasonable?
Thanks, Duncan. Good afternoon, everybody. This is an initiative being led by the European Commission to bring a standardised approach to undertaking life cycle analysis on all types of products and services. And synthetic turf is one of the pilot industries that they are working with to trial this concept. And ultimately what they want to do is, through European public procurement regulations, put far greater emphasis on the environmental implications of a product or a service that you are purchasing, where there is public funding involved. So as Duncan said, manufacturers will be required to assess their products against that criteria. It will give a ranking of products, so you can then look at them and compare product A to product B. Thanks, Duncan.
And you're expecting this to come in late this year, early next year, is that?
The project is scheduled for completion in that time frame. I think initially it will be a voluntary concept out there in the market. The FIH might have incorporated it into its quality program, but certainly throughout the European Union, ultimately the intention is that this will become a part of public procurement regulations. Therefore, it will become a legal obligation for public bodies to look at the environmental impact of the products or services they are purchasing, and therefore for the suppliers to have this data readily at hand so that they can submit it when they're bidding for a project. And as most full-size hockey facilities have some form of public procurement funding involved, they will have to satisfy that criteria.
So as a pitch designer, we see this as a positive, because it will mean that there is an independent, if you want to call it that, sort of score applied to products, and it won't stop manufacturers and product providers from marketing the benefits of their systems. But then you could go back to this and check that what they're claiming is borne out with their score across these measures. That's how we saw it, Alistair. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's a good summary. It's going to be slightly complex because we have so many different parameters there under consideration, but ultimately there will be an overall score as well. So you'll be able to look at the impact of the system you're considering. And potentially it will be broken down into the different components of the shot pad, the carpet. Clearly, if you have a wet turf, which is currently what top level hockey requires, that uses water. Using water has an environmental impact. And in certain parts of the world, certain parts of Europe, using water, which is a scarce commodity, will get a negative rating. So a turf system that uses less water will be more positive than one that uses a lot of water. A dry turf will be even more positively received. And likewise, as you mentioned earlier, systems that incorporate recycled materials will get more positive ratings. Systems that can be recycled will get more positive ratings as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alistair. And that's almost a perfect segue into the last slide or two. So, and the reason that we felt that slide previous was worth putting up is not to say that what we're doing in or what's happening in Europe is better than anywhere else. It's just to show that this is coming, and where it's happening in Europe, it's reasonable to assume at some point it will come in different territories, maybe in a different format, in a different way, but that assessment criteria for sustainability is something that it's going to happen more in more parts of the world than Europe, albeit Europe is looking like it might be the first. Thanks, Alistair. And I said great segue because this is the sort of bit that maybe is the most interesting or useful at least. So we've covered everything that we've looked through in terms of elements of pitches. What we want to do at Not Sport is be seen to be committed to using and finding the best solutions that are available to us. So that's across all those areas and more that we've covered in how you build a pitch up, from drainage to base to shot to surface. And then these are a set of questions that we think are worthy of taking away wherever you are in the country and saying to your pitch providers or people that you're talking to about a project, or even yourselves, what are the latest developments that are happening in the synthetic turf industry, and who can we learn from? So Alistair is a great point of contact at the FIH for that. You might work in a part of the world, and your association might be in a part of the world where there's quite a mature hockey market, so there's plenty of contractors and providers, so you can speak to them, and just basically understanding what the market is saying in terms of sustainable options. Taking best practice from elsewhere in the world, of course, as well. Hopefully this presentation has stimulated some thought that you can take into your own schemes. Alistair just said it. What recycled materials are available? What can we include from a recycled material point of view in our designs and solutions? So there's not a recycled hockey grass, but there might be products from a shop pad point of view that use recycled products, either in part or in larger quantities than others. Can we use those recycled? Sorry, so there's recycled materials that you might look to use, but also can we use recyclable materials wherever possible? So when you do get to the end of your pitch life, you can deal with those products in a sustainable way and recycle them. So not everything is recyclable, but there are options and they'll increase in number over the coming years. Can we reduce the amount of stone? Can we use recycled stone so that the impact of your project is less? There's less holes being dug in the earth to dig out stone and quarried aggregates. In doing so, can you reduce carbon footprints as a result? Lots of different lorry movements. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, worth considering. What products and solutions are available with longer performance warranties? Do they come with the other areas that we've mentioned, recyclable materials or recycled materials? What are the ways that we can future-proof the design now? We've mentioned that at length on each of the stages, so that we're not just building a pitch. April 2022, it's absolutely perfect for us, but come April 2023, we haven't thought through how people are going to park on it because there's been a huge increase in hockey usage. So how can we future-proof the design of the pitch and everything around it now, but also in the future? And who are the people we need to contact to understand any new standards that are coming in, like that slide we looked at in Europe, from a sustainability and life cost point of view? And who do we talk to about getting those recommendations as they're published? So, as I say, this is an evolving area. There's going to be things that are brought in from a standardisation point of view, from a government point of view, that we will have to adhere to. There's going to be voluntary things, as Alistair's just said. There's going to be new products coming in, and all this is going to evolve over time. So we haven't got a slide of answers. We've got a slide of questions, because the questions are going to be relevant for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Anything we give in terms of answers today are probably going to be outdated within a year, 2 years. So it's much better to think about the questions to ask, so that as you develop your project in your territory, you can get good answers and work with Alistair, come to me, others in your area and territory who can give you latest advice. Use them as a sounding board to see if what you're being told is correct. So there's plenty of support, but there's equally a lot of information going to come out over the next few years with new products and standards as they happen. Next slide, Andre. We're about there. So there we go. So the idea was that we would give you an overview. It is broad because each of the areas that we went through could probably demand a presentation for an hour on their own. And the idea is we can give you some questions to ask, and then myself and Alistair, Andre, and Mike and John are here to answer any questions that you might have. Seen chat flashing around, so I assume there's some in there. And we'll do our best to answer any specifics that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you so much. The good thing is we have quite a lot of questions, so I decided to spotlight you both because they might be relevant to both of you. We also have some people from national associations here and continental federations here in this meeting. I might, if we have time, I might ask them 1 or 2 questions at the end, but I'd first like to bring Hallie Chopra at the stage. Hallie Chopra, I'm going to make you, oh, you're there, great.
Hello.
Can you ask your question?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for doing this. This has been super informative, especially for countries that are maybe outside the center of, you know, the knowledge of all this facility stuff. So this is an amazing forum to do this. So I'm located in Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada, the capital of Canada. And for those of you who haven't been to Canada, we experience very dramatic shifts in climate, in temperature from the seasons. So we're talking in February, -30, and in August, +30. So this dramatic change in temperature and climate throughout the year has been a unique situation. When we've asked some turf manufacturers what their suggestions are to ensure that we can, optimize the life cycle of our facility to live through these conditions so that we can get that 15-year life cycle, so that we can keep our facility running and running properly. It's stumped a lot of manufacturers. And I'm wondering, through your expertise and your experience, if you have any suggestions on how we can adapt, and maybe there's different installation techniques or different materials that we should be focusing on to ensure that our facility really lasts as long as it can. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is the drainage. That's what really gets affected in these freeze thaw cycles, the drainage and the types of glue that we're using between the different layers. So that's my question.
Do you want me to go first, Duncan?
Okay. You go. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Hallie. I should have introduced myself at the beginning. I'm Facilities and Quality Program Manager at the FIH. So I'm here to answer your questions, hopefully. I think there are two aspects to what you've asked, and you've half identified both of them. One is the quality of the base pavement on which you lay the synthetic turf and the shot pad. Frost penetration is clearly going to be the big issue. If you get water going into the base construction, that freezes, that heaves, that will effectively destroy the smoothness of the base on which the playing surface is laid. So you need to have a really good understanding of the ground conditions. But with your frost, whatever it is, it's going to be pretty severe. So you probably, you're going to need a significant depth of foundation to protect the underlying soils because they will be frost susceptible. But more importantly, I would be giving consideration to actually having an impervious base construction so that the water can't penetrate down into those layers. That will reduce the risk. What that does mean is that drainage has to be via water running to the perimeters. So the fields will drain a little more slowly, but it's the lesser of two evils. I think the second point you would need to... She's gone.
Alistair, I suggest you carry on. She probably had a connection problem because I'm going to take the chance of Hallie's question to then, okay, she's back.
She's
then
back.
I'll link to another part of the world where you have the opposite problem. So we're going to probably use this question to address the whole climate thing. Okay, so, carry on.
So I think the second part is, Hallie, design and build the base correctly. Consider the drainage. Probably horizontal drainage would be preferable. So you basically have an impervious asphalt base. So simplistically, a very large car park or parking lot, and then you lay the turf and shot pad. The dimensional stability of the shot pad and the carpet are going to be critical because those big temperature fluctuations again are going to put stresses onto the synthetic material. It's not great from a sustainability perspective, but I think I would be advocating that you bond the carpet to the shot pad as opposed to loose laying it. So I think if it's loose laid, you basically stretch it and clamp it at the edges, tension it at the edges. But there's a limit to how much protection that can provide. And I think with that such a wide range of temperatures, that might be challenging. So probably have a polyurethane rubber shot pad or an elastic layer, or I think, as Duncan said, in Europe, we call them in situ layers. That would typically be 10, 15, maybe 20 millimeters thick, depending on the particular system. The carpet is then physically bonded to that, so it's all held together.
Okay, thank you. And on that loose lay versus direct bonding, we've definitely had conflicting advice, and I think that's why hearing from you on that is really valuable. So thank you.
The downside is that when you bond the shot pad, when you change your carpet, you destroy the shot pad. So ideally, the shot pads would normally last for at least 2 carpets, but I think that's just a price you're going to have to pay because of your geographic location. That might work well in more temperate climates, but not in the extremes of Ottawa.
Yeah, and we have a few facilities in Canada, but they're on the West Coast in Vancouver, in BC, which has a dramatically different climate than from where I am in Ottawa. So, if there's any fields that come to mind that have similar conditions that I can look at as a case study. I was trying to look at maybe some German fields, maybe up north. I'm not sure, but if there's any fields that come to mind that would have similar dramatic cold conditions, I would love to take a look at those as case studies.
Yeah, I think there's a couple in Toronto, and there's certainly a number in Pennsylvania, which it's slightly milder, but it's all relative.
Yeah. Thank
Alistair,
you.
I've got a question on this topic. So in Scandinavia, on artificial pitches, there's quite a few that go in with. We've never done it, so I'm asking the question of you. Subsoil heating, so heating that goes into the pitch construction to provide greater performance when it is cold. It stops it freezing. Obviously, not great, arguably from a sustainability point of view, because it will need energy, obviously. But from a usage point of view, obviously that creates a more sustainable pitch itself. I just wondered if that was anything that you'd seen under a hockey pitch. It's
predominantly done for football, for soccer. They have more money than hockey, let's be honest. I've never done it. And one of the limitations is, one of the differences is, with a soccer football surface, with a 3G rubber filled system, you don't need a shot pad, an underlayer. With a hockey surface, because there's no cushioning in the carpet, you need the underlayer. The underlayer can act as quite a good thermal insulator. So effectively, your undersoil heating doesn't actually get up to the surface to do what it's meant to do. So again, there's a limitation. I think the other thing, Hallie, to be really careful is avoid snow clearance in the winter months. If you're plowing snow, you're going to move the carpet, even if it's bonded, and that's going to cause damage. So I think, unfortunately, when it starts to snow, you just have to conclude the hockey season is over and come back in the spring.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we practice right now on our multi-sport surface. But when we have that new facility up and running, we'll for sure want to protect it as much as we can. So
yeah,
continue doing that.
And just to maybe end the question, I don't know, but I'd reiterate what Alistair said. So the point that I would emphasise is to spend a bit of money in the early stages. I mentioned about feasibility. One of the things I didn't mention in that is that on every job we do, we get a full ground investigation completed, where they'll dig the ground to 3 meters, do drainage, porosity checks. But ultimately, for what Alistair said, it will tell you what the ground conditions are like, and then that should inform anybody that's designing the pitch as to what depth of stone they need to go to, depth of base, how they could incorporate that impervious layer, of which there's a number of types. But yeah, if you haven't already, you may well have to get in that full ground investigation. Would be critical to understanding how and what the options are for you in terms of everything else is explained.
Yeah, and really quick last point on this, so I'll let there's been lots of questions. I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask them. But something that we've also found is we don't have the expertise in Canada of people who understand the end product. So we have people who, install football, soccer pitches and different facilities like this, but we don't really have an expertise of people who understand hockey pitches here. So having the data, having that strong feasibility study is something that we want to make sure we in, but also we're likely going to have to import someone who is a project manager who can be there and supervise the installation team, because the Canadian installation teams aren't going to have the same care and same understanding for how it all goes in. So even if we have that bulletproof feasibility study and plans, at the end of the day, if the people don't know or don't truly understand how to put it in, then that's where we're going to have a lot of faults. And that's what we found with some of the some surfaces. We tried to go down the sand rest route, but it was honestly a botched job. The sand was, there was way too much sand. People were getting injured. Equipment was getting torn. It was a complete mess. So I think in our lessons learned, also, maybe that's just like my lessons learned that I can share, is that it's not only about having your feasibility study and your plan up front, but also someone who can execute it. And that's going to be a cost to us in Canada to try to bring someone in internationally who can help us deliver what we spent so hard to design and plan.
Yeah, absolutely. There are architects that I'm aware of who have done hockey facilities. One is in Boston, and there's also a lady I know over in Calgary. So there's a little bit of expertise that I'm familiar with in the region. About 60 to 70% of the cost of the construction is actually the base. So getting that right is critical, and that's where you need a good architect, because they understand the ground conditions and the climatical implications. But you're absolutely right. Then installing the turf itself, that is equally important. And laying a long pile football surface, doesn't matter what form of football, that's easy. Anybody can do that. Laying a 11mm hockey surface, that takes skill. And there's a much smaller group of companies who can do that. There are one or two specialist contractors, again, predominantly in the US, who I know can do it. And there is at least one certified field builder that we've endorsed in New York State. So there are specialists out there, but the choice is quite limited. And if you've got to go out to public bid, that's where it gets complicated.
Thank you very much, Ellie.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, we're gonna move to other candidates. If I could bring in Magid, and still focusing our discussion on problems regarding temperatures, climates. So Magid is from Egypt and works in Oman. Magid, if you can put your camera on and your microphone on so that we can see you. Yeah, great. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Magid. So could you tell us a bit about what the challenges that facilities face both in Egypt and Oman?
Well, yeah, hi, here's Magid. Actually, I work in Qatar, and I also had working in Egypt as well. Yeah, the temperature-wise, climate-wise, and weather-wise is the same also in Oman. So just not to repeat what others been saying, we can just say same thing, I think, but from different corners. The weather is one. So when we're talking about water, maybe water is the cost is high, but also the wind in such weather in Sahara places also. So sometimes it ends up that some places the water will not reach there because of the high wind. The second challenge would be the dust. The wind will not be, of course, empty. There will be sand or so on. So the green fields or this hockey fields, and when it is wet, it is the place always which observe every dust running away or flying away. So this kill actually the ground. After some time, you can see the ground is dusty and muddy, and so on. So this is one of the real big challenges in these places. And in the summer, if we're talking about Qatar, for example, or Oman or so, the temperature can exceed more than 50, and which is of course too hot. So if you don't water them enough, then it reduces the age of the ground. Thank you so much, and sorry for taking extra time.
Thank you very much, Magid. Thanks so much. And it is Qatar, not Oman. Apologies.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
I think from my side, Duncan, Maggie, good questions. In terms of watering the fields, there's clearly issues with wind, with heat. You may be aware that the FIH is asking the synthetic turf industry to develop surfaces that replicate the qualities of wet fields without the use of water. And we are starting to see companies now not necessarily bringing products to market, but there are R&D trials going on where new technology is being used. At the moment, it's probably too early to say whether it fully replicates the qualities of a wet field. It's probably better than a dry field, but not as good as a wet field. It's somewhere between the two, but they're heading in the right direction. So we would like to think that within the next couple of years, there will be solutions that allow hockey to be played on a surface that does not require watering, but has the desired playing characteristics. The dust is an issue. It's a big issue in many parts of the world. We come across it frequently in India and Pakistan as well. The dust will contaminate the surface. It will impede the drainage. So when you do get rain, that will become a problem. It can also, depending on the type of dust and sand, it can also be quite abrasive to the fibers, so it will shorten the life of the carpet. So you need to invest in good maintenance equipment to protect the investment. There are machines out there. They're not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. They could be $20,000, $30,000. But effectively, you can give your 7,000 square meter carpet a vacuum cleaning every so often to take all that dirt and contamination away. And I would seriously suggest that if you're investing many hundreds of thousands of dollars in a new field, you should add a bit more on and buy the right maintenance equipment at the same time.
And I think we go back to feasibility, Alistair. It's understanding what that is. You're just given a perfect answer, but also the frequency and any cost in terms of actually administering that maintenance. So again, it comes part of that feasibility, the life cost analysis, so you can make a sustainable investment. What nobody on the call, I'm sure, wants is to see a hockey field going in, and then 2 years later it be contaminated and borderline needing replacement. So understanding that from the outset is covered it at length, but that is a critical part of it.
So now I'm going to move from the Middle East to Africa, and I'm going to ask Ahmed Azmi to come on stage. Ahmed, you've put quite a few questions, so I suggest maybe you choose the one you want to start with. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Hello, gentlemen. Let me just go over the questions quickly. The first one was about choosing between the old technology of lighting versus the new LED or LED technology. Is there a criteria to look at in order to decide which way to go?
I'll take this one. So I think, as I said in the presentation, there is a point now we're seeing where the cost of LEDs has come down from a capital cost point of view. So the installation of a new lighting system should be, assuming it carries through to different parts of the world, should be equivalent to a metal halide, older-fashioned installation. And then the running costs are such that if you get the analysis from your lighting providers in your area, they should be able to illustrate what the running cost savings are. And if it's a new installation, would be able to give you a complete package design solution that will show you what the impact of the physical lighting is on your local area. So typically with LEDs, we're seeing the ability to control light so that within 15 to 20 meters of the fence line, it's controlled back to whatever it was before. So basically within 15 meters to 20 meters of the fence line, there's no light spill that would be a problem. So you need to consider the local regulations, if there are any, that you would need to comply with for both LED and metal halide. assuming that LED is viable and it's a new installation, I'd say the running costs would be such that it would be likely to be the solution you went with. But it's, as I said in the presentation, worth considering both and getting information that allows you to assess both, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, that's what I say. I don't know whether you offer any different opinions to that, Alice.
I'm going to slightly contradict that, Duncan. I apologise. What we are now being told, and we've now introduced lighting into the FIH quality program, so we have certified lighting suppliers. What they are telling us, which I've been hearing elsewhere as well, is that effectively the market is now moving very rapidly to LED. When you put in a lighting system, particularly with the old metal halide technology, you're assuming that that lighting system is going to last you 15, 20 years, and you'll be able to buy the components to service it over that life period, because the components will not last for that length of time. You know, the bulbs themselves will blow at some point. And what they're now saying is that as the demand diminishes, the justification for continuing to produce old technology diminishes. And if you put in a metal halide system today, I would suggest that within 10 years, you will not be able to buy the components you need to continue to use it. So effectively, you'll end up having to scrap it halfway through its life. So I would actually say I would be very, very cautious about using the older technology from a life cycle perspective.
So basically, Alistair, you are saying that this is like a technology shift, and eventually with the increased demand, they will achieve economies of scale, and then we will be an LED industry.
Yeah, lots of people bought video recorders. At some point, you bought a video recorder, then suddenly find you couldn't buy the cassettes because there was nobody was producing them. So it's exactly the same concept, that there will become a point where the market demand for the replacement components is so small, the companies will just stop production. And then you've effectively got an obsolete system that you can't repair or service.
Great, thank you for that. The other question is, when you explained, Mark, about the downsizing rather than recycling, so these factories, do they buy the used carpet to make it into another product? So there's some revenue coming out of
Yeah, they won't buy it. There will be so there's a cost already of somebody stripping the turf off a hockey pitch and disposing of it. So these companies will basically take the responsibility for doing that, charge you for taking it away, and a gate fee, as they would call it probably, of processing that material and downcycling it to form a building composite or product or whatever it may be. So it won't. There will be a cost attached to it.
So it's cost, not a revenue. No, it's a cost, not a revenue.
Exactly.
There's two forms of recycling that are being introduced. There's mechanical recycling, which is what Duncan is referring to, and the limitation with that at the moment is that the output product that they can produce from the recycled turf has a low value. It has a value, but the cost of processing the material is not met by that output. Therefore, they have to charge you for disposing of it for you.
So taking it off and transportation to their location.
Well, it's taking it off, transporting it, and then physically processing it. They're basically making a low-grade plastic granulate that can then be used to produce timber decking and garden furniture and that sort of thing. But it's relatively low-value products that you can produce from the end-of-use turf, primarily because the carpet has a mixture of different plastics and they're not very compatible. However, we are starting to see chemical recycling coming into the general market. Chemical recycling is where they will take any type of plastic. Synthetic turf is just one form of plastic ultimately, and they can convert that. They basically convert that back into hydrocarbons from which they can make new plastic. So that potentially has more commercial value. And certainly some of the chemical recyclers are saying that they would like to be taking material at zero cost to the person supplying it. I don't think we're there today, but that I think is a more likely output. That's and chemical recycling has the advantage, as I say, it's not specific to turf. The turf recycling companies need a defined or a minimum value, quantity of turf to justify the investment. You know, maybe 100 fields a year, whatever the number is. If you're in a country where there's only 30, 40 fields a year being resurfaced, they're never going to invest in your region because it's not economically viable. Chemical recycling is just another source of plastic. They're happy.
Looks more promising, yes.
Yes.
Okay, regarding the 16 key
Yeah,
impact
well,
categories you mentioned, if a turf manufacturer is scoring high on these categories, does this mean this is a more sustainable supplier? And does that entail that it's more expensive? Is more sustainable more expensive, basically? This is the question.
Probably not any cheaper.
That's a good way to answer.
But yeah, I would definitely say it's not going to be any cheaper. I suspect it might be more expensive. To a degree, up until now, the industry, and I know a lot of people will find this hard to believe, but the industry has been very price driven, that it's a competitive market globally, and price is driving. Whereas certainly within Europe, from a regulatory perspective, they're trying to put more emphasis on the environmental impact, so that you're not just looking at the bottom line, you are looking at sustainability as additional criteria. If the market moves that way because of the political momentum that we're seeing, that will force manufacturers. So the recycling is a good example, and I think as Duncan mentioned in his presentation, if you can make the carpet out of a single plastic, it's easy to recycle it. If they could do that today, they would be doing it. The fact that they aren't means that there's going to be new technology, new materials, new innovation. That will all come at a price.
My last question, which is going to be relevant to everyone, not just Africa, is that sometimes sports authorities or clubs or national associations, they make a big study and invest and try to make their best decision to buy a new turf. And then after 10 years, they discover that they need to change it and they have no money for that. So the typical thing is to have a financial model whereby you can set aside an annual amount to be able to have a sum at the end, which will be at least near the future price of a new carpet and or shock pad. So my question is there any financial model that can help everyone in that respect?
There is guidance. Sorry, Duncan. There is guidance. The problem we have, the cost of the materials fluctuates so greatly around the world. And what you would pay for a carpet in the UK, I go back to Halley in Ontario. I don't know how they build any fields in North America. They are so expensive compared to Europe. Whether it's supply and demand, I have no understanding why, but I have seen quotations recently for fields in the US, and I just couldn't believe it. But that's the market rate over there. So the guidance.
In the sub-base? Do you mean the sub-base?
No, I mean the turf.
The turf, okay. Just
the turf. Various different reasons, market sizes. I'm sure to a degree it's what the market will tolerate. That if you can charge 1.5 times what you can get away with elsewhere, you would charge 1.5 because everybody's looking to make a profit. But sinking fund calculations, there is software out there that will do it, and you should be able to find estimates of what the carpet will cost to replace. I mean, typically, I think in the UK, we would be looking at probably setting aside something like €15,000 a year or £15,000 a year to ensure that in the 10 to 12 years time, you've got enough money to lift, dispose and replace your carpet.
Thank you. I'm sorry for taking. Sorry.
I was about to say, Ahmed, that if you've got a document or any information as to what the installation of the grass would be today, then obviously that would be where you would benchmark your cost. We would usually say add something like 5 or 10% on top of that. And then at least you've got a figure to base it, because as Alistair says, it's going to vary from territory to territory, from country to country. If you've got a price in a document somewhere relative to your area that says the cost of the installation of the turf is X, you're hoping your carpet will last at least 12 years, I'd say, if it's a good one. So you'd be doing X plus 10% divided by 12 as a sort of crude example. I go back to my sort of point on some of this feasibility stuff. If anybody on the call is looking at a project and is getting advice and information and quotations, ultimately, challenge your provider and say, right, okay, these are the questions that I need to understand, and see what answers they get back. And I'm commercial sort of beast, if you like, but Alistair's not. Alistair's there to provide the best advice from an independent point of view. So Alistair's a brilliant point of contact, as is Andre, as is himself, if you've got any questions once you get some information back from people.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm conscious of time. We're way beyond the 90 minutes. I just like to give room to one more question, this time on the South America, because it's a very particular market, which is different from what we have been talking so far. So if I could ask Alfredo to come to turn on your camera. Alfredo is from Chile. Alfredo, if you can, yeah, good.
Thanks, Andre.
Yours.
My first question is similar as Ahmed. How is the lifetime between the turf or the pitch and the shock pad? And now we are changing the turf in our club, and we had the problem. The provider says first, yeah, the shock pad can have 20 to 30 years, and after that open, they say, oh, you have to change the shock pad. So do you have that information? There is an estimate time. The different shock pads have different lifetimes too. That's the first question I have.
So within the FIH hockey turf and field standards, which is the basis of the FIH approval for turf systems, we have specific requirements for the shock pad, and we have set those with the intention that a shock pad should last for 2 carpets. So Duncan says 12 years, he's optimistic, I'll say 10, but you should definitely be able to use a shock pad for at least 2 carpets. Now, those standards are relatively new. They've only been out in the market for the last 3 or 4 years. Prior to that, there were no quality standards for the shock pads. Therefore, companies could get away with using inferior quality products. Depending on the type of shock pad you've got, if it's the in situ shock pad or the elastic layer, that ultimately also depends on the quality of the mixing and laying of the shock pad on your field. That if the contractor wants to save a bit of money and puts a bit less binder, which is the adhesive that holds it together, into the mix, when the field is built, it's perfectly okay. Everybody's happy and content. It's not until you come back after 10 years, you suddenly find, somebody cut a corner, and now you're going to pay a big price for that issue.
What happens to us?
Yeah, you won't be the first, unfortunately. That's for sure.
And the second question I have is about the maintenance. Sometimes you can have this 2 years more or 3 years more of lifetime of a pitch with a better taking care of the pitch. I see a picture. We have here in Chile the problem. Sometimes we have like a fungi on the pitch because of all the water based. Is there any product you can use? Is this maybe because of the water we use? What are your advice for that, Tima?
There are herbicides that you can use to control the algae and the fungal growth. It is a problem with wet field. It's a nice environment for algae to become established, particularly if it's wet and warm. So it's a nice humid atmosphere. There are chemical treatments. You need to be careful that the herbicides you use do not adversely affect the carpet, the plastics in the carpet. So you should definitely speak to your turf supplier to say, is this a suitable chemical to use on your particular carpet? Some of them are chlorine based, and chlorine attacks the UV stabilizers in the plastic. So basically it will cause the plastic that makes up the carpet to weaken and fail prematurely, particularly if you're not part of the world where you have high UV radiation. So be careful.
I think I'll just add on that as well, that if it's a watered field, the maintenance of the pitch is important. But again, we've got a water field here where the maintenance and treatment of the watering system wasn't done correctly. And so they were recycling some of the water, which is a positive, but ultimately they were just spraying contaminated water back onto the pitch. So it's important to maintain the whole infrastructure, the irrigation, the pumps, etc. If it's not a watered pitch, what Alistair said, if it's a sand dressed, for example, or if anybody's on the call looking at non-watered systems, then what Alistair said is absolutely would advocate as well. And speak to your turf provider. They should be able to some advice and support specific in your territory, knowing what the local products are, good and bad.
Thanks.
Yes, it's Alfredo. Thank you all. Well, I don't know how to qualify this. It's how long, how much after the limit we're way out of time. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to wrap up for now. I know that there were some questions that were still needed to make, but I think we've pretty much covered most of them. I'd like to take this chance to thank Duncan for a great webinar. I dare to say that this was probably the one that we've been able to cover, let's say, the more subjects within the life cycle of a facility. I know that this doesn't cover for all the issues and all the problems that nations or NAs or clubs face. I just want to point out that if you are in the UK, Not Sports is a stakeholder in that area. And if you need any information regarding facility standards, regarding all sorts of certification and quality instructions or parameters, you can always refer to Alistair Cox, who is our facilities and equipment manager. You can find his details. Alistair, did you put your details on the chat as you normally do?
I can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Alistair would put his details in the chat. There's also information about the quality program in the FIH website. Again, if you have any questions, any information that you wish, you can always contact us and we will refer to you to the most qualified person. In the Academy, we are not facility experts. We are education experts, and we try to bring in the actual experts from the different fields in hockey. I want to thank everyone again for coming in. I know that it's quite early for some of you. It's in the middle of work for others, and it's quite late for a few others. So thank you again for coming. And one last time, Duncan, thank you. It's been great. and we look forward to seeing you all at the next National Association Development Series webinar. One last information. As usual, we record all the webinars and we post them on the FIH Academy YouTube page, where you can find all or the previous ones we've delivered, and you will find this one as well soon. So thank you again. Have a good rest of the day, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are, and looking forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.